Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for tuning back into the channel. Really appreciate you checking it out. Sorry if my voice sounds a little bit rough and raspy today. About a week ago, came down with a virus. Won't say which one. No big surprise. Been a little bit under the weather lately. So, between trying to get through that and keep myself healthy, haven't been able to do a whole lot of video posting. But today I was feeling fairly well. So, figured I'd do a quick video as long as my voice will hold out. One of the things I wanted to talk about today, I should say the topic that I want to talk about today will venture off the chronology that I've been doing of my progression through the agency and respond to a couple of viewer comments. Shout out to Ash and Emmy. You get the Gold Cup Marathon Award for being the first one to sit through all the videos. I really appreciate that. Hope that they've been helpful and informative and given me ideas of things to talk about. I've had a fairly decent amount of viewer comments asking specific questions, and I've done my best to respond to them in comment-wise. Problem with that, it leaves a very closed-ended kind of situation. So as long as my voice holds out, I'll get to as many of those as I can without trying to make the video too terribly long. Let's see. First up on that list, I'm sorry. First up on that list, I had a viewer ask, do COs at TDCJ get badges? No, you don't. The shirt has the agency patch, it has the United States flag patch, and on the left side it has a little circle, unless it's changed. It has a little circle, TDCJ, State of Texas, with the Lone Star emblem on it. It's sewn on the shirt. There are a couple of different reasons that this is done. One, it's cheaper. The agency doesn't have to spend near as much money to sew a patch on as they do to have an actual badge that pins on. Number two, safety issue. A badge in a fight with a group of offenders or even a single offender, it could be removed and used as a weapon. Badges are usually pinned on in two ways. There's going to be the long pin. I'm trying to show my finger here. There'll be the long pin that sticks down in the shirt, or the two prongs that press in, and they'll have the little backings that clasp to the prong ends. In the military, we call those dammits because you're getting ready to pin it on, you drop it, damn it. So it's just affectionately called that, but for reality, it's a backing. So no, there are no metal or plastic badges for that. Another reason, security companies have experienced this in the past. They give this nice big badge to their security officers, and some individuals will try to portray themselves as police officers, law enforcement officers. They'll show the badge at a club, trying to show off, show it on the street, in a store. They'll put it in their wallet, just posing, trying to portray as something that they're not. So it's a way for the agency to avoid that, because unlike certified in the state of Texas, once you receive your license, you are a certified peace officer. Once you hire on with an agency, you're a commissioned police officer with all powers that the agency bestows from there. Corrections officers, by definition, in Texas, are not law enforcement officers. They're not allowed to carry firearms the way police officers are. They don't have powers of arrest. Where the authority for a corrections officer comes from is in the walls of the agency as set forth by the agency's guidelines. So that's the big definition right there. Another one of the comments, housing for corrections officers. Some of the older facilities do have barracks, base housing. It's usually temporary living for corrections officers that report to the unit. Now, it can go two ways. It's either for senior officers that have been there for a while, that have been on a waiting list, or it's for new officers that agree to take a position at this agency, at this particular unit. They'll be temporarily housed here, we'll just say 3 months, and that's the time that they have to find a place to live before they're removed from base housing. Now, as far as permanent residents, the only ones that I saw typically were for the warden. In Beaumont, there were the 3 units. Stiles was the max security, LeBlanc and Gist were the state jail facilities. I don't believe the state jail facilities had housing for the warden. I know at Stiles that they did, but it was just for the warden, nobody else. So that answers that on base housing. A couple of people have commented about how does overtime work? And one of the comments was a viewer had heard that, so you're on shift, it's about an hour before you're getting ready to get off, broadcast comes over the radio, we need X number of officers to stand by for overtime, nobody responds to it, you get a call, you're next up on the list for mandatory overtime. That's probably a thing that takes place at 8-hour units. There can be mandatory overtime. I'm fairly certain that is a thing. The benefit to that, a lot of officers do like their overtime. At the end of your shifts, you've typically worked 48 hours. Any other hour that you're going to do is overtime, and the pay is pretty nice. So a lot of officers typically jump for that. Now, at the 12-hour unit, the one I worked at the Stiles, there wasn't mandatory overtime. Texas labor law has a cap at 16 hours for employees. So it doesn't do any good to have an officer stay back for 4 hours and then they would have to be released from there. What usually happens when overtime is needed for shifts, the offgoing shift, or not the offgoing, the shift that's off for their 4 days, phone calls will go out to those individuals who has expressed interest in overtime. At the Stiles, there was a sign-up list for overtime. You would sign on for it through Human Resources, and it was kind of a contract that on your 4 days you could receive a call at any time for day shift or night shift for overtime. You didn't have to take it, but if you refused it so many times, you could be removed from that. So the individuals that had signed up for that, they would get the calls, and those were the ones that would get called in to stand for overtime. How did the unit know that they needed overtime? Officers would start calling in, and whoever had the master tally sheet of who was going to be where, once it reached a certain number, that's when call outs would start going for overtime. But at 12-hour units, as far as being told, hey, you're going to be standing mandatory overtime, I never saw that happen. I'm not saying it doesn't, but in the 2 years that I was there, that was never a thing. I personally didn't sign up for overtime. I felt that working 48 hours in 4 days was enough. Now, you're saying 40 hours, anything after that should be overtime. And by rights, you're correct. I described in a previous video the extra 8 hours that you have at the end of that 4-day shift, 12 times 4 being 48. That 8 hours was comp time, compensatory time, compensation time, that's time off. You would get 8 hours vacation time at the end of the month. I believe it was 4 hours sick time at the end of each month. And essentially you would have, I think around 16 hours comp time each month, because each month you would usually have around 3, maybe 4 of your 4-day shifts. So you had to use your comp time and your vacation time at the end of 2 years. If you started January of 2019, February 2021, you had no more comp time, vacation time. It would wipe. So you had to use it. Your sick time would accrue unlimitedly. There were officers that in a 20-year career never took sick time. And once they would hit around 18 years, they would essentially have enough time to sit at home on sick time, it was their time, and still be paid. It's not a bad deal. If you're one who never calls in, or you're getting a decent amount of comp time. Now, the agencies were real sparing with how they used overtime. It was expensive, it was costly. You would usually only get overtime if you were on your 4-day off period and you would get a call. Now, this is my experience. There are probably many different more. If you're watching this and you've worked at other agencies and you know of a different way, feel free to chime in on that. I love hearing about how things have changed. I also spoke about corrections officers' ranks, CO 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and the number of months it took to get there. Back when I joined, if you had an honorable discharge from the military or at least a 2-year college degree, you would come in as a CO3. It took approximately 9 months. From the time you hired on, 9 months later, you would make CO3. And the only difference in that was the amount of pay that you got. You didn't have an insignia, a device. One of the things that wasn't unique to the uniform was the name tag that you wore. The state would issue you a little plastic black backing with white letters with your last name on it. It was cheap. The glue would melt in the heat, or the first time you got into an altercation and you ended up on the ground, it could break. So you were kind of on your own after that to get your own name tag. Now, there were many different ways to get them. You can go online and have one made for you. All the law enforcement supply catalogs, Galls, American Outfitters, Law Pro, the list goes on and on. They can make all different ones: gold, silver, metal, plastic, all the different letters, insignias. I actually had one specially made for me. I had it gold with black lettering, CO, 3 ones for 3, CO3, and then I had Carter with a comma, JA on the back of it. And then there's an attachment that you can have added to the name tag. It pins to it and it kind of hangs down below it, and it'll say serving since, and it'll have the year on it. Now, for officers that have been in an agency for 20 years, that means something. Someone like me that had one, I was trying to look tough, cool, whatever. Look at me, I've got this really cool name tag. Oh, the other thing I had to it, I had the Lone Star State insignia attached to it as well. It was a pretty fancy looking name tag. I had serving since 2013. And what year was it that I was working? 2013. May as well have said, serving since breakfast. It's a true sign of a rookie. But whatever, I thought it looked good. So that's one of the things that you can customize to your uniform. Let's see, what else? We talked about housing, we've talked about pay. Oh, lack of air conditioning. Yes. I worked in segregation. Spoiler alert, the shift that I was assigned to, that I had requested, was day shift administrative segregation. We had to wear, on top of our uniform, we had to wear a thrust vest. It's a black vest, Velcro on the sides. I'm doing this like you can see it. Look like a chicken wing. It had Velcro on the sides, and it was to keep you from being stabbed. It's not the same as a bulletproof vest. I shouldn't say bulletproof, that's not the word anymore. A A bullet resistant vest and a stab resistant vest are not the same thing. A bullet resistant vest will not stop a sharp object, a knife, a stiletto, not the kind you wear on your shoes, but basically an ice pick. It will not stop that. Bullets are not sharp. Bullets are blunt force trauma. We can argue this all day. They don't affect like an ice pick. So when a bullet resistant vest is hit, it spreads the force out. A stab resistant vest is meant for point impact. A stiletto hits and stabs through. Okay, it doesn't spread out like a bullet does. A bullet will flatten out. So the ice pick, and yes, inmates, offenders will make spears. They can take newspaper, any kind of paper, roll it up very tightly, pour milk on it that they get from lunch or breakfast, let it sit and stew. It will turn to wood. And then they can rub it on that concrete and basically fasten it into a spear. And there's wire on the doors that they can see through. They can make it small enough that with the light off and you can't see in the cell, you walk past, inmate can stick that spear out through that door and it can stab you. And it can be infected with anything that the offender has on them. So we had to wear these thick stab vests. They wouldn't stop bullets, but we weren't worried about bullets. There were fashioned firearms that were made, zip guns, as they're called. You can look that up online, get a good description of it. But that wasn't our concern. Our concern was a piece of iron, metal, a spear, something stabbing us. So where I was going with that, segregation did have air conditioning. Yes, it was air conditioned in there. That did not mean it kept us cool. It didn't circulate very well. You could be in this air conditioned spot and 5 feet over here, it's just blazing hot. It just depended on if there was a fan around to circulate it or if the system was working that day. In the summer, not the summertime. In the wintertime, they would have the heat on. Oh my God, it would be so freaking dreadful in there. You would walk in and just, you wouldn't necessarily feel the heat blowing, but just the hot, stagnant air that was circulated in there was absolutely miserable. And you can't just open a window and let it circulate out. It was there. General population, there was what was called climate control. For those that have lived in the areas or old enough to remember an attic fan. If you look up at your ceiling, there would be a big cutout in the ceiling and it would have slats or what old houses would have louviers in it. And it was just a fan. It didn't blow air down. It rotated the opposite direction. It drew air up. The theory was to draw the warm air up to it and out the building. So it wasn't actually cooling anything, it was just supposed to remove warm air. The facilities that had these that worked would move warm air around. Problem is, state of Texas, 3-story concrete metal building, there's nothing you can do about the heat in it. It's just hot. It's not too bad down on the ground floor. Once you get up on the 3rd tier, that's where it would just get absolutely dreadful. Just stagnant air. And you're going to hear people say, you'll get climatized to it, you'll get used to it, suck it up, drink water, stay cool. Okay? Drinking water is important. It's essential. You have to. Every day I went to work, I'd carry a plastic bottle with me. At one point it had either Gatorade or Powerade in it. You had to cut the label off of it to bring it in. I had to write my name on it so that way it wouldn't get confused with an offender's. And I would usually drink between 2 to 3 of those a shift. And it wasn't cold water. It was whatever came out of the tap. Usually it was lukewarm. And by the time you'd get back to it, I'd sit it on the table by the door, make my rounds. By the time I got back to it, bottle be room temperature, so you're drinking warm water. Yeah, quote, warm water does hydrate you better, but it's not comforting, and it doesn't cool you down at all. You just stay hydrated. So in the summertime, I saw a lot of officers, new reports, who couldn't handle the heat, and they'd resign over that. A lot of older individuals that would hire on strictly for the state benefits couldn't make it through the summer heat. So bear that in mind if you're thinking about this for a career choice. Bear that in mind. The heat is real, and it gets a lot of individuals, and offenders use that to get over on officers. They're there, they can't leave, they've gotten used to it. When they see an officer starting to suffer from the heat, they're not there to help. They take a lot of joy in seeing officers not come back. And a week will go by, you'll come on shift, and an offender will ask you, boss man, what happened to Boss Jenkins? Jenkins ain't here no more. And then the concert would just erupt. I learned early on, don't tell offenders anything about other officers. Boss man, what happened to Jenkins? I don't know him. Hey, man, you worked with Jenkins last week? I don't remember. I'm here today, man. Yeah. You gotta learn to respond how you're gonna respond. That's gonna keep the best security that you can. So the heat, it's a real thing. Another comment was about benefits. Do you have to have the insurance that they offer? I don't remember, but let me add to that. I think if you had an alternate source of insurance, if you're retired military and you have your TRICARE benefits, if you're a reservist and you have TRICARE benefits, or if you have medical through something, I'm military right now. I don't know what the insurance is like out in the civilian world, but I'm pretty sure if you have your own form of insurance, you do not have to take what the state offers. At the time, it was COBRA and TRS, Texas Employees Retirement System. That was what you paid into for your retirement. Health benefit was different. I think as long as you had something, you didn't have to take what they offered, which meant you collected more pay. Insurance was extremely expensive there. At the time that I worked, I want to say just a single male, me, not married at the time, no children. I believe I paid around $700 a month for insurance, maybe more than that. I don't remember. I think they require you to have some kind of insurance. I don't think you can walk in and say, nope, I'm good, I got it, because a week later you get pushed down the stairs, you get hurt. Now, I'm not sure what happens in that. I know there was a form of insurance that if you were injured and you had to take time off, you continued to get paid. I did have that plan for that one. So I don't think it's a mandatory requirement. I could be wrong. They might, especially nowadays with COVID. I have no idea what the situation is like in the academy. I think you can be required to take their insurance as terms of hiring on with the agency. Again, I could be wrong. You'll just have to check with human resources. Lastly, one of the comments that was made, one of the viewers mentioned that they'd heard that Stiles was 80% HIV positive individuals. Now, you got to be careful where you hear that source of information. One, the individual that said that, by law, they're not allowed to say that. If they did, and it's true, number one, they violated a HIPAA law. They could be removed from their job for that. If they said it jokingly, in jest, then it could mean anything. I don't know the actual numbers, the statistics, anything to that nature. I do know that there was a very high number of inmates that were at the unit I worked at, the Styles unit, that had some form of infectious disease, hepatitis, HIV. I'm fairly certain COVID has just astronomically exacerbated the numbers that are there. There were It's a unit designed for 2,250 individuals, and at the time I worked there, I believe there were around 2,900. They had to build dorms inside the facility to house the extra individuals. Cells that were meant for 1 to 2 individuals could have 3 and 4 guys in it. Just the numbers just were greater than what the facility was designed to have. So where I was going with that, I'd be careful where you trust any kind of source of information for that, but I do know that Styles was classified as a medical facility. It had a fairly large infirmary. Pill nurse went around every day passing out medications. Medications, that's not a word. Medications. Of course, I didn't know what they were, couldn't ask, didn't care. Just had to watch the offender take the medicine, lean their head back, stick their tongue out, show that they had taken it. Yes, there are a lot of diseased individuals at that facility. The folklore was, if you got this many individuals with this disease, put all of them together, they already have it, they can't spread it around. I highly doubt that there's any kind of legal classification that allows that. I don't think so. I'd like to think it probably just worked itself out that way, but I'm pretty sure that it was done like that by design. I could be wrong, but it does make sense. If you've got 10 facilities and you've got 10 individuals, if you take one and spread them out, eventually everybody's going to get it. Take all 10 individuals, put them in one place, these other 9 places should in theory be safe. So it makes sense when you think about it in terms like that. It could have been set up that way. Thanks for watching the video. I don't have a whole lot of humor in for this one. It was a little bit of a struggle to get through this. I really hope that everyone has enjoyed this video. Hope that it's answered some questions. Sorry if I've been a little bit redundant on things that have been answered, but it's good to do upkeeps and recaps and combine previous videos into one to answer questions. If anyone has more questions, please feel free to comment about them, ask away. As I get the time and the chance and I get better, I'll be posting up more content. Hopefully on the next video, I can follow up on my experience in OJT with the add seg shift and how I went further from there. Everyone stay safe, take care of yourselves. Please adhere to all the safety guidelines. These are very tough times that we're living in right now, and anybody considering a career with TDCJ, please be safe. Please do your research. Watch these videos. I'm doing the best I can to humor as well as educate anybody. A lot of the content I'm putting out, it is outdated. A lot of it does still apply though, so take everything with a grain of salt. Enjoy, and I look forward to seeing everybody on the next video there. Thanks a lot. Y'all take care. Be safe.